Hello and welcome to Kinship Connects, a podcast from Seventh-day Adventist Kinship. We invite you to join us as we share our stories and our journeys. My name is Floyd Punitz, and today it is my great privilege to speak with Matt Segebartt. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for sharing with us, Matt.
Thanks, it's good to be here.
Yeah, hey, we've known each other for a few years now, so
Yes,
it's
we
like
have.
sharing with an old friend, so that's a good feeling.
Yeah.
It's a good feeling. So tell me now, where are you located? I see your name says Vancouver, Washington. So tell us a little bit about where you are right now and what's going on with your life currently.
Living in the Pacific Northwest, so love it up here, Vancouver area. That's where, I spend most of my days. So it's easy to get out to the coast, easy to get to the mountains, do a lot of things along the river and Columbia River. So, yeah.
Cool. Very pretty area. Very pretty area.
Yeah. I've lived a lot of places, and for me, this kind of checks all the boxes. So,
good. Okay.
For a long time, I was like, I'm not sure where I'm from, having grown up in Colorado and various places, and people would ask. But now I'm like, no, I'm from Vancouver.
It feels home, huh?
It feels like home. Yeah.
Yeah. Good deal. Well, you mentioned Colorado, so let me take you back to a couple years to when your childhood, and tell us a bit about growing up and your family, stuff like that. Whatever you want to share.
Cortez, Colorado is where my grandparents were at. That's where I was born also. And it was just always a place I came back to, whether it was to visit grandma and grandpa, family, Christmases, that kind of thing. We did a lot of stuff there in the La Plata Mountains, go to Telluride. It was always just the stomping grounds to come back to. Mm-hmm. And then once I got my religion degree and started pastoring, I actually went back and pastored the church there for a while. So it was kind of interesting. The story goes, when I was young, and we lived there, my parents were there, of course, and we had kind of a ranch at the time. We had horses and lived out in the middle of nowhere up above Dolores. But we'd come down and go to church. And I'd often apparently not be super happy in church, and they'd ask why. And my answer was, well, because the pastor gets to do all the talking. And I didn't love that. So, when I went back to Cortez and pastored there, I kind of made that wrong right. I got to do all the speaking. So, yeah.
Cool. Okay, very good. So tell me about your Adventist pedigree.
As I understand it, I'm third generation Adventist. My grandparents converted from Mormonism, I believe. Mm-hmm. And then my parents, my dad's a pastor, and then myself. So that makes it third generation, right?
Yeah. Nice. So, okay. So you mentioned that you pursued a pastoral degree and path. Did you do that because your dad was a pastor, or do you remember hearing God calling you saying, Hey, Matt?
Well, that's a good question. I think the short answer is it's what I was familiar with. Okay. I grew up in the church. I enjoyed many aspects of working in the church. My dad went back to college when I think I was about 8 and went out to PUC and everything. But when I went and registered for classes as a freshman, I walked in the door and I didn't know what I was going to major in, right? Well, I found myself standing at the Greek table and thought, well, I guess I'll sign up, and walked out of the room like, well, I guess I'm a theology major. So in a way, that's a little bit of an oversimplification, but I think it was because it was familiar. Mm-hmm. And I was, growing up, I saw a lot of meaningful things that took place in the church, and,
Yeah, cool. So a PK.
That's me.
Pastor's kid, yeah. So you went to PUC, you said? Is that right? Or...
My dad went to PUC. Uh-huh. I went to CUC out in Maryland for 3 years, and then I went to 2 years. I graduated at Union.
Okay. Yep. And then Andrews? Did you go?
I did not go to Andrews.
Okay, lucky one. Okay.
Well, that was, yeah, we'll leave it there. I wanted to do a master's in worship studies because that was one of the things that I spent a lot of time with in ministry, was doing worship conferences. I got trained with natural church development. I did some with church planting, but going to Andrews and getting the MDiv, just, it didn't feel like a match for me, so I didn't go.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So how's your Greek today?
I use it almost every day. No, I can't remember.
Cool.
I was not the best Greek student, to be honest. But
okay.
Languages are not my giftedness.
Yeah. English is, with English you do just fine.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Good.
I can't speak German, so that's your original.
That's
right?
my forte. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So how many years were you a pastor?
I graduated in 2001 and then stepped away from ministry. I was in Kirkland, Washington in 2014. So about 13 years as official, card-carrying, credentialed, pastor.
Okay.
In college and everything, I was always on the student association and, always had those kind of roles. But yeah.
Are you still card-carrying credentialed?
Well, yes, until they change that.
Okay. Cool. So we've skipped ahead. So
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So let's go back a ways. Since this is a kinship podcast, tell us about when you, started feeling different, or what might have applied to, what words did you apply to that feeling?
I appreciate the sensitivity of the way you worded that. This podcast, this interview has been something you and I have talked about for a while. And I know, I plan to tell my story. And for years, as you know, Floyd, I feel like I've wanted to, because as we share story, it allows other people to be seen as well. I will admit a certain level of anxiety, even as we begin this, but I'm leaning into it because I think it matters and I think it's important. So I just want to acknowledge that on the front end, and also say this hasn't been a super easy journey for anybody who's been on this kind of journey. You understand. So your question was, when did you start to feel or sense that there might be some changes in the air? Is that in essence what you asked? Yeah.
Exactly.
When I stepped away from ministry in Kirkland, I loved pastoring. There were many, many things about pastoring that I really enjoyed, but when I stepped away and came down here to the Vancouver area, it was a time of transition for Susan and I and the kids, right? And I got into real estate, and I knew I wanted to do something different. I'd planned to go into counseling. Counseling is something I'd always been interested in. I enjoy, understanding people and personality types and Myers-Briggs and, all those kind of things. We grew up talking Personality Plus with Florence Littauer and, Sanguine Melancholy, all those things. But I knew in 2014 that something was different, something was changing. Ministry wasn't working for me. I loved the people there. I loved the music. The potlucks were amazing. just good things. But I remember sitting in my office one day after a particularly contentious board meeting, and I almost felt like I heard an audible voice saying, this isn't ministry, this is politics, this is something different. And that's no shade, that's no anything on the church, but those of us who've done ministry, we understand that, right? There's a lot of things, carpet colors and placement of flower arrangements, that it's like, really, this is what we're so when I came down here, I knew that there was going to be some changes. So to make a long story short, my sister moved to town and have 3 small kids. And my sister's also gay. So, ta-da, there it is. That's the first time I've said it publicly. Also implies, yep, me too.
Yep. Okay.
And she moved to town with her wife, and I wanted to spend some time with her and the kids. They had a mini farm. And for a lot of reasons, a lot of valid reasons, a lot of good reasons, that became a discussion point for my wife and I. Should we do that? Should we not do that? What about the influence? There were other dynamics, personal dynamics. But because of our inability to agree on that particular family dynamic, we sought counseling. Like, how do we do this? How do we come to an agreement on how to, spend time with the kids, family, all those kind of things? That started Susan and I on a couple-year counseling journey where we were doing good. We were going through, faith, family, fun, finances, parenting. We were covering all the parenting or all the relationship bases. And I feel like that was a really meaningful time in our life. And I just want to pause for a second and tag the fact that one of the things I struggle with is I never want to tell Susan's story. I mean, she obviously is going to experience, and I don't want to tell my family's story or another, but I have to tell my piece of the story because it's all I know, right? So I just acknowledge that I want to be super careful there. But as Susan and I did counseling, there were some things that began to be unearthed in our relationship. And there was one point where she acknowledged, and she very beautifully said to me in the presence of our counselor, I just feel like there's a disconnect with us at an intimate level, at a personal level. And I remember leaving that counseling session that day going, wow, what was that? What is that? What do I look at? What's real? Because I'm hurting her and I'm not sure why. I'm not sure. And I don't want to hurt anybody. That's never been my intention. And so at that point I got my own counselor. And so simultaneously I'm going to multiple counselors, and I started a journey of kind of discovering some things about myself, asking questions. It was one of the first times I felt like I had a super safe place to just say, well, this was going on in my internal landscape. This is what I was feeling. This is what I was thinking. And what I realized after about a year of doing that was that particular approach that religion gave me was that you don't look at being gay. If that's something that's a reality in your life. And I remember since the time I was 7 or so, knowing, I'm different. Something's different here. And that's not me rewriting the story. That's me acknowledging the story. But I realized in counseling that I wasn't really given the language to be able to even explore what was true for me. Because, and part of it is based in my sister's story. And I asked her, is it okay if I share a little bit? And she said, yes. She's an entirely different personality type than me. I want to talk a little bit later about the Enneagram. That's something that has been super helpful to me. But anyway, she's a different number. She's a different personality type than me. And she came out when she was 18 in a uncomfortable yet direct way. She was like, this is who I am. This is how it's going to be, kind of thing. And I remember as a 14-year-old, my family was really struggling. How do we deal with this? What will the church think? What will the elders say? My dad is a pastor. Like, how do I deal with my own daughter? This whole, and there was very much this feeling of, well, let's keep it carefully behind doors. Let's not deal with it in a public way. We don't want to embarrass anybody. We don't want judgment. We're not sure what to do. And behind closed doors, there was some intense language around, hellfire and brimstone and that kind of thing. And I remember as a 14-year-old, that was the time when I realized this is not okay to even engage with. And my personality is one of people pleasing. It's how I've always been. I'm good at being empathetic. I'm good at listening. I'm good at making sure that I make people happy, like do the right thing, be a good boy. And I'm reluctant to say this next piece, but I feel like it's relevant. I remember, my dad does not remember, but I remember at that time, my dad sat me down and said something along the lines of, if you have any of those same feelings as your sister does towards the same gender, it is not okay. It is not God's will. Get married, and God will fix it. And in counseling, I remembered that as a pivotal moment in my life of, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is how it has to be dealt with. This is what's going to happen. And I just set my direction in that way. And that's what I did. Mm-hmm. And when my wife wrote that, or, communicated to me that she was feeling some disconnect, I feel like the pieces began to come together. And then as I worked through, because I know our audience is familiar with, terminology and all those things, but my whole construct of being gay was, well, I don't want to dress up in drag, so I must not be gay. Right?
Right.
So in counseling, I wanted to be sure, like, is this some sort of daddy issues? Is this some kind of other thing? Is this because of some trauma that I experienced as a kid? Because if I do make a definitive statement of I'm gay, obviously that has implications for my marriage. And, I wasn't currently pastoring, but I still care deeply about the fact that I'm an ordained pastor. And I think most of the people that I pastored would say that I did a reasonably good job. And I was afraid of losing all of those things. So for a year, I worked through, what is this? Mm-hmm. And some people may say, well, that's where you went wrong. You asked questions and you talked to a counselor that opened up things that you should have never talked about. Some people would say that. I don't think that that's true. For me, that's not the case. So am I talking too much?
No, this is great. I mean, you're answering all my questions before I ask them. So.
Okay. I went through a time of depression right then because I realized the Bible's pretty clear on not lying. We can have a long discussion on, is it clear on a lot of other things, lifestyle, being gay, all of that. Is it clear? What does it mean? Those are longer theological conversations that you and I have spent a lot of time on. But in that moment, the only thing that was clear to me was, well, it's clear that you're not supposed to lie. And so now that I know this thing about myself, I'm gonna have to talk about it. And so in the presence of our counselor that Susan and I had been going with, I picked a day and said, this is what I'm going to tell her. One of the most difficult days of my life.
Yep.
Because I had a lot of fear about what does this look like? And I love her, but I didn't want to hurt her anymore. And there was just this impossible decision to be made. And so that was a tough day. Mm-hmm. I'm reluctant to share this too, but it's part of the story. To my surprise, she said, I knew you were going to tell me. And she told me the night before we got married, she heard a voice in the car saying, don't marry him, he's gay.
Wow.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And that hit me really in a very, I don't even know the wording for it, because in a way I felt like other people knew before I did, And again, this comes back to the Enneagram. I'm the kind of personality that in a way absorbs other people's energy before my own. And one of the things that as this story has progressed, that I felt the most kind of shame about is legitimately people have come to me and said, so you lied? You got married and you lied to your wife. You lied to all of us. I'm worried that church members will feel that I lied. And this isn't me like self-protecting. This is a deep acknowledgement of something that I didn't realize, where for my particular personality, and this isn't the same for everyone, but I was sitting in a class with the Enneagram and they were talking about nines. And, 5 of the people on the stage were nines, and they talked about this dynamic of sort of it's not a midlife crisis, but in midlife, many of them, particularly with conservative religious backgrounds, realized, whoa, I am suddenly living this life that was created for me, not necessarily one that I chose. Mm-hmm. And when I learned that, and when I heard that, it actually gave me a huge just wave of peace, because I can apologize and I can say, I am so sorry for the hurt that I have caused. And I'm so sorry for the lack of self-awareness that I had. But I also can be graceful to myself and say, in somewhat simplistic terms, I just was trying to be a good boy. I was just trying to do what God wanted, what my parents wanted, what I thought was expected. And when I had to let go of that, there was a lot there. So the Enneagram gave me that language to be able to understand that a little bit more. And so moving forward, from that day with Susan was, as you may expect, complicated. I'm proud of the fact that we took 1.5 years to explore, like, what are our options? There was a lot of hurt. There was a lot of confusion. We wanted to put the kids first. We continued in counseling, actually. And it transitioned, because for a while we weren't sure, should we get a divorce? What do we do? But in time we made the difficult decision. And I remember she said, I picked a good one, and so did you. Yep. But we have another half of our lives to live. And do we want to stay married? Should we stay married if it's not consistent with who we are? And so we hugged each other and cried and said, I think this is what we have to do. And so we made very specific plans towards that. We talked with a counselor about the most healthy timeline with the kids. We sat the kids down and told them that we were going to be getting a divorce, which was a very difficult day as well. But we had a plan in place. The counselor said one of the things that's hardest for kids with divorce is the uncertainty. Yeah. And so we already knew where I was going to be moving to. The kids had already spent some time at that location. We let them know the schedule was not going to be changing. Mommy and Daddy both still love you, and so we did some really specific things to just be sure that, their world was not completely upended. And then we maintained a schedule, and Susan and I continue. And I'm proud of the fact that we live out here and we don't have, my sister now lives up in Seattle. That's a longer story. Her wife passed away of cancer during the middle of all of this. But Susan and I have continued to work together to make sure the kids are in a good space. And so for me, it's been a real process and Floyd, you can laugh at this because you were one of the first people that I called when I started counseling, my individual counseling, because I started to figure out. And I just have to say thank you to you for the hours, literal hours.
My privilege.
That you let me verbally process, you let me kind of unpack things without judgment. As you know, I went through years of reading different things, listening to different podcasts, trying to decide, am I side A, am I side B? How should I be an advocate? Should I be an advocate? Is God? I've had some people in my life tell me that the fact that I'm now open-minded and affirming of people's uniqueness is representative of the fact that counseling has ruined me and that I've been brainwashed and that I am now a representative for Satan. And, I've spent some time working through all of those pieces and ultimately have landed on the only option that I can see that's viable is to accept people as they are, because we all are dealing with different things. And one of the things I wanted to talk about today, and this maybe feels like a tangent. Am I talking? I always feel like I talk too much. You're just nodding.
I'll jump in when I need to.
Is the level of unawareness that I've had. There are people that are born, and forgive me, I'm going to use some terminology here, but there are people who are born with ambiguous genitals, right? They're born. There's this fascinating little tribe or little group of people in the Dominican Republic where they're born girls and then they hit puberty and they literally grow, male parts.
Okay.
I don't know.
Surprise.
Yeah. Surprise. There's this reality that there are people who are either asexual or, fascinating documentaries on people who were born where their parents assigned them gender. And then they get older and realize, oh, that was a misassignment, and there are so many things in life, whether it's your sexuality or your expression of sexuality or your attraction or whatever it is, where it is, I really love the word spectrum, because there is a spectrum of uniqueness. And the thing that I began to realize is how much I didn't know about all of these kind of things, how people are so uniquely, and we say this, right? We are uniquely and wonderfully made. And then we quickly say, but not you.
That big but that goes into that sentence. Yeah.
And I've come to realize the level of shame that all of us really carry with things that we would prefer people not know about us. Mm-hmm. And what the LGBTIQ plus community does is it gives language sometimes around being open-minded. And I've shifted my thinking, and this may sound arrogant, but I think in some ways, God is a God of paradox. Mm. And I think the queer community is actually amazing in that they're teaching the rest of the church and the rest of the world what it looks like to actually be accepting of people, whether they're fat or thin, I should say overweight or thin, or whether they love themselves, whatever it is. There's all of these different, and it's fascinating to me that in nature, we love diversity. Plants, and God is a God of science and beauty and, deserts and rainforest, all of it. But when it comes to being human, mm-hmm. you kind of need to look like this. You need to wear a suit and tie, and you need to look like this. And if you're any variant, then we throw all kinds of absolutely loaded verbiage and judgment on those individuals. And there's so many people living secret and quiet and lives of shame when they don't need to. Mm-hmm. And that's why I feel like I've come to a place where I want to tell my story, is because I want to see those people.
Right.
I feel like, and I refer to it as my third conversion. I was hearing the story of a trans individual, and actually, Floyd, you and I were at this conference years ago. Mm-hmm. We landed in Denver. I think it was the first time I met you.
Right, in person, yeah.
And I went to that conference because it was a Christian conference. And honestly, up to that point, I didn't realize you could be both gay and Christian. And again, when I say gay, I'm not saying anything about lifestyle. You can be gay and not practice. You can be gay and who knows what you do in your private time. When I say gay, I just mean I didn't know that you could be both gay and Christian. And this conference was one that I'd found online. And I thought, well, I want to go research and sit in a room with those people and see what that feels like. Mm-hmm. So I flew to Denver and sat in the hotel across the street for 5 hours, scared to death to walk through the doors because I was pretty sure, some alarm at the general conference was going to go off,
Yeah.
And anyway, so I did go through. What's that?
It didn't, though.
Well,
the alarm went off.
And sat in the first meeting, and it was a story, and I don't remember the guy's name, but I remember thinking it was a trans individual who was a pastor, and he just told his story of transitioning. And up to that point, I did not understand, and I realized at a profound level how judgmental I had been. Mm-hmm. And I sat on that back row, and tears were coming down my cheeks because I feel like I was converted for the third time. My first time was my baptism when I was 12. Like, mm-hmm. Okay, I'm getting baptized. That's what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
My second time was I was recruiting for Adventist Frontier Missions because I had done mission work with them. And when I came back from the mission field, I was going around to camp meetings, and I heard a sermon by Ty Gibson. And he was talking about what happened at the cross. And I remember it sunk in. I mean, here I am literally, right, coming back from mission work, and I'm understanding grace at a deeper level. Right. So that was my second one. And then the third one is this one I just described, where I realized there are people who have experiences that there is no way that I can understand, and I have no right to judge them for what they experience. And the only thing that I can do is I can look at them and say, how can I help? What do you need? Mm-hmm. How can I help alleviate shame in your life? How can I advocate for you? And so that was the beginning, that conference, and continuing to talk with you. That was the beginning of me really dealing with some things, unpacking things. I slowly came out very intentionally to my family. It's only been about 8 months to a year now where I sent some videos to people that have meant a lot in my life in the past. You know, some of those people have responded, some have not. I realize everyone has their own life. On my side of the fence, it's been challenging because with a non-response, it makes me worry, you know.
Right.
Are you? And so there's working through all of those feelings of loss and loss of community. And what if I've had some deeply meaningful conversations with conference leaders, people that I've worked with, where they've affirmed me as a person who's done meaningful ministry. Mm-hmm. They've also acknowledged that in our current structure, being fully affirming is not. You can finish this sentence. I'm not sure how to finish it, but is not where we're at. And I will tell you, it's taken me a long time to get to the place where fully affirming is what I am.
Yeah. And you can say the G word now.
What's that?
And you can actually say the G word.
I could say it. Yeah. I cried so hard the first time I said that, you know. That was a tough one. But I've researched some of the other ministries that shall remain nameless because I don't want to speak poorly of anyone. I think people really are trying to do the best they know. Mm-hmm. But I will say I have some sadness around some of the ministries that I do think are based in judgment. I think there's this underlying difficult, nuanced thing to talk about. And we use language like identity in Christ or you know, we're not gay, we're identity is in Christ, or whatever it may be. And that's very confusing to people. What they need to know is that they're accepted and that all of us have lifestyle things to work through, whether it's what we eat or what we listen to or what we watch. That is common to the human experience. And if my identity is in Christ, or my identity is somehow separate from how I live, you know, there's a disconnect there that's challenging to talk about. Right. And it makes me a little sad, I think.
Yeah. I mean, God created you as a unique individual and not the same as the person, you know, down the road or next to you or whatever. Yeah. As Adventists, I think growing up, we're given a script. We're taught that there is a script, not several, but there is one script
Yeah.
and the word gay or queer or whatever does not fit into that script.
Mm-hmm.
And we're told that as long as we follow that script, then we have the pearly gates and the golden streets at the end of it,
Mm-hmm.
and everything will be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so often, if we feel that we don't fit into that script, we either spend our lives trying to mold ourselves or remold ourselves into that and hurting others in the process,
Yeah.
or we step out of the script and create our own. And I see that that's what you've done, what a lot of people have done.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, in that deconstruction process, that fear of loss of community, it's profound. And there was a time, when I was pretty depressed, and I'll admit it, I was borderline suicidal, because of the fear of, and honestly, divorce is painful. And, the day I moved out, I go for a walk every day, but I was thrown up in the bushes, that day, because I can't believe this is my life, and this is what we're doing, and this is what's happening. That was hard. But the day that I realized, what if my church has been wrong? What if I have stood on platforms myself as a pastor and said things that hurt people and was wrong? That to me was equally as painful, because we're entrenched with this idea of this is what God wants. This is what we're supposed to be. And the fear of not pleasing God. And, the rhetoric around some of the people that I've told my story to, they're like, well, Matt, you're just deceived now. And we're sad about that, and I don't know how to combat that and be able to say, I actually feel closer to God now than I have almost in my entire life. And some of the beautiful people that I now know, and I'm proud to say, are in my community. It feels entirely different, and absolutely soul-filling and healing to be able to actually talk about real life things with people where you don't feel like there's this possibility of being dismissed or those kind of things. And I have to say, and I have what I call a tribe. Those of you who are in that, who you are. I'm profoundly grateful.
What do you tell people that are trying to follow this script and are saying, hey, Matt, you just didn't quite pray enough and your faith wasn't quite there?
Yeah.
I mean, that hurts, but that's what I hear a lot. So what do you have to tell those people?
Two things come to mind as you ask that question. And one is, I myself was there years ago. It was just what I knew. And I think people who ask that question, I want to believe is coming from a sincere place in them. The second part of that answer is, I've come to deeply believe, and Floyd, you told me I could do a little bit of self-promotion, but I feel like this is maybe appropriate time to do it. Sure. I've started a website, mattsegebartt.com, where I talk about the Enneagram. I do individual coaching. I got certified as a spiritual director. And what I would tell people, to answer your question, is it's important to look at what's real. It's not selfish. It's not wrong to ask questions about how you experience life. And your experience is going to be unique to you. And God, I can't pretend to speak for God. One of my favorite quotes now is, I'd rather have questions I can't answer than answers I can't question.
Say that again.
I'd rather have questions I cannot answer than answers that I cannot question.
Cool.
And I feel like that's the shift for me. I used to be, as an Adventist pastor, I know the 28 fundamentals. I have a degree. But I used to be afraid somebody would come to my office and present me with a problem that I didn't know the answer to. Like, I don't know the scripture that addresses that unique thing that you're struggling with. This may feel like a tangent, but it feels relevant to me. My grandpa had MS, and he was an elder in his church. And sometimes, in order for him to have the energy to preach for the day, right, he would drink a little bit of Dr. Pepper. And the story is he was riddled with guilt. How can God bless my sermon when I am, drinking, unholy beverages, that kind of thing. And I just realized all of us have variations of that same kind of story where it's not dismissing the fact that, yes, there's right and wrong, but we each have nuances to our own experience and our own life and our own physiology and all of it that is worthy of being looked at. And one of the most damaging things I think I've discovered is this religious view that it is selfish to ask questions. Oh, now you're, gay pride, which I struggle with that. The word pride, we're not supposed to be prideful, right?
Right.
What does that even mean? But what I've come to understand, and yes, some of the pride parades and all of that, there is a contingent of representatives at those that do not represent all of us. There's as in with every human, there is a broad array of behaviors and all of it. But at the end of the day, we are fearfully and uniquely and wonderfully made. And when we're able to give ourselves compassion and understanding, when we operate from that place, I'm not afraid anymore. When people come to my office for counseling or for coaching, I don't have a lot of answers, but I do know that in the presence of not being judged, people can find some healing and some peace and some language around relationship challenges and spiritual challenges. And if we ever think that we can speak for God, who we believe is infinite, how can I ever presume to say that I know what God says is right for you?
Right.
So I've walked both lines of that. I know there's the idea of it's a slippery slope. Once you start, then anything goes. There has to be black and white. If you say anything goes, then what did Jesus die for? There is, and I understand all of that. And the thing that is profound to me is I've found in the gay and trans community, the friends that I have anyway are asking amazingly meaningful questions about how can I make a difference? How can I live my life in a better, more meaningful way? It's not about debauchery. For some, maybe some choose, whatever they want to, that's fine. And that's a strong word. And forgive me, I don't mean to even have judgment around what some would call being sex positive. But what I've found is that as an overarching rule, the queer community is absolutely amazing in their ability to teach me about what it looks like to be accepting.
There's a lot of honesty there coming from the community. Yeah.
And a huge amount of healing that I think the church needs to learn from.
But if somebody tells you, hey, but the Bible is clear, it's very simple, clear, there's no questioning.
Yeah, I've heard that so many times.
Do you feel it's clear?
Again, I have two answers to that. I think the Bible's clear on fear. The Bible's clear on judgment. We're all riddled with fear, and the Bible talks at least 365 times about fearing not. Mm-hmm. The Bible's pretty clear on judgment. It's pretty clear on love. There's a lot of things that it's not clear on. Again, as it relates to individual persons. Mm-hmm. I mean no judgment on this, but you can you can be an elder in the church and have all kinds of addictions, food addictions, or as long as you keep it behind the scenes. But the minute I say, guys, I've been gay since the time I was little, I just didn't have words for it. The minute I say that, I'm in danger of losing my ordination and being told that I'm headed to hell.
Right.
And to me, that's unclear. The Bible, as you know, and this is a whole different podcast, and honestly, there's many resources on kinship. There's many resources available. But even the word homosexual wasn't in the Bible till 1946, as you know. There are so many things I did not know. The 6 clobber verses, 5 of them have nothing to do with, and arguably 6. And again, I'm looking at the time. We can't go into.
Right.
But is the Bible clear? I think it's clear on some things. And I also think that there's definite room for nuance on other things. And open-mindedness for humans. Why can't we all just be human and experience life in its own uniqueness?
Yeah.
We know that it's true. We don't deal with our own, and I'm going to get on soapbox here, so you'll have to stop me, but we don't deal with our own stereotypes. There's this idea, and I struggle with this with my kids. One of the reasons why I did come out is, and I've told my kids now, that was another stage, but if it is genetic, nature, nurture, I don't know. But let's say one of my kids is, I want them to know, no matter what, I love you, I am there with you. And I don't want to propagate or perpetuate the stereotypes of, if a woman wears more manly clothes, then somehow she's evil, or vice versa, right? Even the clothes we wear is cultural, but religion is the first to say that, well, you need to adhere to being culturally, wear the right outfit. And that's cultural. That's not biblical. And forgive me, but sometimes in a passing sort of joking way, I'll say, well, Jesus wore a dress. Right. Again, culturally, and I know, forgive me, I'm not trying to hackle or raise anybody's feathers. The last thing I want to be is controversial, but I had a friend of mine recently talk about, some of their favorite TV shows. Now there's a gay person, on that TV show. And why do I have to have this gay agenda shoved down my throat all the time? And there was a time when I would have agreed with that. But now I feel like, so when you go to the grocery store, you do realize that 7 to 10% of the people in that grocery store are probably gay, right? Or somewhere on the queer spectrum.
Right.
Should we clear out the grocery store before you arrive because you don't want those people to be in your presence? I get it. Hollywood has its own version of, and again, the more interesting personalities are the ones that get put in front of the screen, but do you see what I'm saying? And so don't challenge our own stereotypes, whether it's clothing or, media or Hollywood or whatever. We just sort of accept that. But then as conservative religious people, we have a mixed message. I guess.
Growing up, I wish we had queer representatives on TV or wherever in the media, because then I could have had a role model or someone to at least compare to and look at and decide, I'm like this person, but I'm not like that person, kind of thing. And even in the church, we grew up there was a real void, a vacuum there of any role models that fit our picture. Yeah. And so we tried to fit ourselves into someone else's mold, and it just didn't fit. It just didn't fit for us. You mentioned Enneagrams. What is that exactly?
So, can I tag one thing before?
Yeah, certainly.
I know you're the interviewer. I just want to say, joining a minority group was another major difference for me. And again, as a, white picket fence, white male, married with kids, all of it, I felt that. And then I think people had fear for me, right? Like my safety, if you come out as gay, then you're going to instantly. So I think that's valid. There's some fears around it, but also it was a major piece of the learning for me, is what it feels like to then become a minority group. And again, now when I see people represented on movies, this is a tag from what we were just talking about, like you were saying, role models, I feel a level of peace in that, okay, there's a person that actually represents a version of me that I actually think is right. And all of that. So I think that's an important piece that we recognize as well, is if you haven't walked the path, you can't understand it. And even me, I'm figuring out this life journey, but for much of my life, I didn't understand. And I actually misrepresented. And so I'm grateful for the learning journey that I've been on. So I just wanted to tag that. The Enneagram it's been around for a long time, couple thousand years, as I understand it.
But it's not witchcraft, is it?
It is not. However, when you initially look at the graph, it could look a little bit like a pentagram. So
okay.
No association there. And there are some who, again, with yoga or whatever, we have these conservative viewpoints that don't get anywhere near that. But I know for me, stretching is a good thing. I'm getting older and it's good. Mm-hmm. The Enneagram for me, as I mentioned, has been life-changing. And what it is, ultimately, is a spiritual tradition of it's storytelling, basically, at its core. But as I've been trained in it, it actually has to do with understanding the fruits of the Spirit, really. There are 1 through 9. There's numbers. There's a lot of complexity to it. There's the number, then each number has a wing. Then every number, when they're feeling in a good place, they represent different things. So anyway, I can't teach on all of that right now, but at the end of the day, what the Enneagram has done for me is our strengths carried to extremes become weaknesses. Okay. And one of the things that we do as humans, what we do as church members, as business owners, as whatever, is we see our own view as the right view, the correct view. And what the Enneagram has done for me is it's given me language around the 9 different personalities that all go out into the world expressing the fact that they're right. And we all get in these fights of I'm right. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. And the Enneagram has given me language to be able to acknowledge, like, for example, 8s are challengers. That's just the nature of who they are. Mm-hmm. I mentioned that earlier with my sister, right? So she's a challenger. I'm a 9, which is a peacemaker. So her strengths carried to extremes become weaknesses. It's great that she's a challenger, but also on the receiving end of her challenging, and her and I can laugh about this, sometimes it's not so fun, right?
Right.
Me, I'm a peacemaker, which is a wonderful thing. Many times the compliment I would get as a pastor, whether I was leading a board meeting or preaching or whatever, is that I have a peaceful demeanor, that just creates a safe place for everyone. That comes from my Enneagram. But as I've described in this interview, being a peacemaker actually became the thing that kept me from showing up in my own life. Because if I actually talked about my internal landscape, it wouldn't go well.
Right.
And I was not given permission to do that. And so every one of the numbers has that. There's a 2 that's a giver, which is a great thing, but sometimes givers give too much and they give with strings attached. There's covert contracts, and we get in these arguments of, well, I've done nothing but give to you. And you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And in churches, we do that. Well, we need to serve. All the 2s are standing over in the corner saying, we need to have service ministries. We need to, and those of you that are not in the service ministries, well, God's not quite as pleased with you. Right. But there are literally 5s who are researchers, who are sitting at home quietly researching. and they're playing their part in the, as we say, body of Christ, right? That's the religious lingo for that. Ones, incidentally, are perfectionistic. And the way that can play out in a church setting, I personally believe that conservative churches often have a lot of ones and twos. There's a lot of givers, let's serve, and there's a lot of ones, because ones like to be right. And their gift to the world, literally, is being right, whether it's doing it correctly, or, cleaning something correctly, or being organized, or researching the theology, or whatever it is. And they genuinely feel like the service I am giving to the world is giving them truth. Right. They also get a little offended if you come back and say, well, I see that differently. And they're like, well, me and God are right, and I don't know what your problem is. Yeah. And so the Enneagram has really just given me some language around all of that, that's helped me honestly have a lot more compassion for myself and for others. Because I ultimately absolutely firmly believe that all of us are important and valuable and contribute something meaningful to this existence on planet Earth. And
make some sense of it.
Make some sense of it and build community and have long-lasting relationships, and to be able to live in messy situations, with complexity. I love some of the stories of friends that I have that, they're best friends with their ex-wife, still, even though they've walked through this difficult place. I've longed for some of those same outcomes, and I hold hope with some of my extended family and everything, where in time, I hope we can mend and heal and come to an understanding. And really, I wouldn't say, the last years have been profoundly painful, and there's a lot of grief and hurt, and it has not been fun, but I have come to a place where I am grateful for the things that I've learned. I am, and I think you told me this in one of our conversations 5 years ago, Matt, there will come a time when you, and I'm still reluctant to say it, but you'll be glad that you're gay, because it will teach you a lot about yourself and others, and you will have some understanding. And that back then, I don't think I believed you, but I'm getting there.
Good. I can see that. Yes, you have a smile on your face now. So that is good. So so the Enneagrams, just real quick on those, sound really fascinating and interesting. If anyone's interested, they can contact you, and you can help them with through your coaching, counseling, website there.
I do. They can come to my website. I do an initial 3-session. This is what I've done, where I'll talk with them a little bit, talk a little bit more in depth, some of the things that I just have. Then the second session is actually a survey that they take. It's about an hour long, where they fill out some things. And then the third one is we talk about the results and what the implications of that may be in their church or family or relationships. And then from there, I'm wanting actually, and I live in such a beautiful place and at my facility, I have the condo where I live, there's a community room that seats up to 50 people. So in time, I'm actually wanting to do regular, like maybe a yearly Enneagram get together or spiritual support get together with people who have journeyed through the process, and have others there to talk with. And then literally it's right here on the Columbia River, where we can maybe get a kayak out or something. So that's partly what I'm doing with the next phase or the next chapter of my life is working with that.
And what's your website again?
MattSegebartt.com. That's
with 2 T's?
MattSegebartt.
Okay.
Segebartt.com.
2 T's on each word.
Correct.
Yes.
Or Congruency Quest. I actually have both of those domains, but there was a time when I wanted that. So through Facebook, it's actually Congruency Quest, but it leads you to the same place.
Cool.
So there is a Facebook group with my spiritual direction that you can like, and I occasionally put out some things there as well.
Good. Well, as we wind down here today, I think we could do several podcasts and still not cover everything. It's been really good. obviously, as a pastor, you're not the only queer pastor in the Adventist church. So what would you tell someone who's listening who has maybe some doubts or doesn't know, am I gay? Am I bi? Am I curious? Am I straight? Am I being deceived by the devil? What's going on? Am I the only one in the whole denomination that feels this way? What advice or what words can you share with them?
The answer that's coming to mind is just the phrase, spiritual things are spiritually discerned. And I would tell you, you're not alone. I would tell you, be cautious with the resources that you, again, do what I did, research all of it, talk to different ministry leaders, figure out I didn't know all of this terminology, side A, side B, the realization of there is a spectrum from being kind of antagonistic to supportive to actually being an ally to being an advocate. A lot of people shrug their shoulders and say, yeah, I'm supportive of the gay community. They don't know what that means. Mm-hmm. And so what I would say is, one, you're not alone. Two, talk to the right people. Research it, be open-minded. If we believe that the great controversy is true, the idea of making choice is, in fact, something that God values. Mm-hmm. And so make an informed choice and talk to people, find a safe place. And this is a little bit of a tangent, but it's connected to my ministry. One of the things that I found is there are a lot of pastors, there are a lot of ministry leaders, there are a lot of people who at the conference level, division level, union level, who actually would be advocates and allies, but they're afraid that they will lose their job if they do. And some of you may say, well, that's an integrity issue. Some of them may say, but every movement that is worthwhile has its progression. And so I would say, if you're in a position to make a difference, make a difference. Mm-hmm. And reach out. And there are a lot of confidential, kind, caring, informed people that are available to you. Kinship has a ton of resources, and they take their ministry seriously. And I value that. Reach out and talk to somebody. That would be my, and to recognize when you're here and you think you want to go here, when you're in that middle ground, it can feel really unstable and it's scary. Who do I depend? Who can I trust? What if I tell somebody that my kid is trans? What if I don't know who can handle that much information, and it can feel very unsettling. But I will tell you, there's hope, because I was in that unsettled place for a long time. But over on this side, Brene Brown talks about it, braving the wilderness. When you leave the bunker, there's this no man's land, and you're not sure if you're going to get shot at. You're not sure if you're alone. You're not sure what's going on. But when you get out into the forest outside, there are all these beautiful camps of people that you can rely on, you can trust, and they will help heal your soul. And one of the ministries that I would love to have is some sort of fund that helps people in that transition phase where they're like, look, I'm pastoring and I would love to become an affirming pastor, but I don't know how, because I need health insurance. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I would love to be able to start a nonprofit fund that says, all right, we will help you for a year to rebuild a career. Because it's one of the regrets I have is not regrets. Again, I don't regret what I've learned and the life I've lived. Mm-hmm. But I wish I'd have gotten a business degree also, because I'm still paying student loans on a religion degree now from a church that, let's face it, I can't pastor in anymore.
Wow.
So there's hope and there is a future. Talk to the right people. Cool.
There is life afterwards.
Yes.
And a good life. Yes.
Yeah.
So I have a really strong suspicion that we're going to be talking some more and doing some more interviews, hopefully, with you.
Glad to help.
There's a lot of things to cover and to talk about, and to say, hey, someone is not the only one thinking about this. There are other people. that are affected by it. So cool. Well, thank you, Matt. We appreciate it and very much. And
you are so welcome. And Floyd, again, just thank you to you.
Yeah, my privilege.
So thank you.
Yeah, my privilege. So thanks, Matt, and thanks everyone for sharing with us today. We hope that today's podcast was interesting and has given our listeners something to think about. Seventh-day Adventist Kinship is the only LGBTQIA+ affirming community for current and former Adventists. We welcome not only the Rainbow Adventist members, but also parents and family members who want to learn more about how to support their loved ones and be supportive allies to stand with us and make a difference in our church and our world. You can check us out on the web at sdakinship.org or follow us on social media at sdakinship. If you have any questions or comments, you can email me, and if you want to share something with Matt, I'll be happy to forward it on to him. Just send a message to info@sdakinship.org. We look forward to having you with us on an upcoming podcast. So thanks and have a good day.